Welcome to Mac Geek Gab, episode 918 for Tuesday, Peak Performance Day, March 8th, 2022. Oh, yeah, what is happening here? Why is the music not playing? There it would be. Okay, I don't know why it wouldn't have played.
Told you third time.
Third time is the oh, sorry. I mute you guys because you tend to make noise in the background while I'm doing the intro to the show. So I didn't hear what you were saying. So I will do this one more time. The people on the stream heard you. Well, the video stream heard you, but not me. All right, here we go. One more time. Mac Geek Gab, episode 918 for Tuesday, Peak Performance Day, March 8th, 2022. Greetings, folks, and welcome to Mac Geek Gab, the show where you usually send in your questions, your tips, your cool stuff found, and we usually answer your questions and share your tips and cool stuff found. Today, a special second episode for the week. We are going to do something a little different because it is the day after which, or the hour after which we finished watching Apple's peak performance event. We have some thoughts and context and things to share. And so that is what we will do today. We do have a sponsor for this episode. That is iMazing, where code MGG30 at iMazing.com will save you 30% through the end of the month. We'll talk more in depth about why you're going to want to do that a little bit later here in the show. For now, here in Durham, New Hampshire, I'm Dave Hamilton.
And here in Fairfield, Connecticut, this is John F. Braun. And
here in Lee, New Hampshire, Pilot Pete. Thanks for having me, gents. Fun to be
Absolutely. Back. I'm glad we're all able to be here for this. This is it's a good little conversation for us to have. So, the Apple had their peak performance event, which, you know, with PEEK performance, I suppose that's because we get performance and a display from them that we can peek at. Although at a 27-inch display, hopefully you're close enough.
Yeah, I'm still scratching my head over that.
I think it's the display. I mean, I think that's it, right? What else are you going to be peeking at, right? Mm-hmm. So, unless it's the whole MK Ultra thing, but we'll talk about that later. That's different. The CIA said we're not supposed to. What's that, Pete? Sorry.
Double entendre.
It's a double. Yes, for sure. Yeah, of course.
Double entendre.
Yes.
They're good at that.
It's like the French. It's like they have a different word for everything.
That's right. You know,
crazy.
His hat.
So, what was the most compelling or newest thing, gentlemen?
I'm all for the Mac Studio. I mean, I think that's the big news of the day, and I'm eager. Like, so I have lots of thoughts.
It's
about
left
this.
you speechless. Clearly,
it has. So let's look at it for what it is on its own, right? You know, it's the there's lots of things it has been called. It is about the footprint of a Mac Mini, and two, maybe three of them stacked on top of each other. I don't have one to compare.
That was my initial thought when I saw it, and I've already seen some people call it chunky Mac Mini. Because it was like they put like two on top of each other, and it's like, why is it so huge?
Yeah, my wife called it the Mac Medium, so which I liked.
But it's shorter than the Mac Pro, right? Isn't that about the same footprint as the Mac Pro now? The new one? The new one 5 years ago.
Yeah, well, that's right. That's another interesting thing to talk about is that, yes, the Mac Pro. It's an interesting thing. And they've created a device with lots of expandability, right? On the back of it, it's got 4 Thunderbolt 4 ports, 10 gig Ethernet, 2 USB-A ports, HDMI, Pro audio, headphone output, and then inside it's got Wi-Fi 6 and Bluetooth 5. On the front of it, it has 2 ports with a USB-C shape and an SDXC slot. Depending on the processor that you get, and we'll talk about the processors in a little bit here, you either get 2 10 gig USB-C ports or 2 40 gig Thunderbolt 4 ports on the front of it. Again, it depends on which processor you use, and we'll talk about that in a little bit because Apple sort of released a new processor.
are mostly equivalent to even the Mac Mini that I have. There's a few more, which is great because, having more ports is great. And of course, the as you pointed out, the Wi-Fi 6 and the new Bluetooth. So they upgraded the wireless capabilities, which is great.
Yeah. I like this for what it is. It can go up to, again, depending on the CPU, either 64 or 128 gigs of RAM.
Yes, I noted that 128 gigs.
Yeah.
So they're acknowledging that there are people out there that, for whatever reason, need more than Apple has offered in their past machines. So that caught my eye.
You can get 64 gigs in an M1 Max MacBook Pro, right?
Yes.
I think it's the same chip, so I would assume that my memory's correct on that. Someone in the chat room at live.macgeekgab.com will correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, and what else? Up to an 8 terabyte SSD, though I think you can get that if you have the cache.
Yeah.
You can currently get that in most Macs.
It's 7.1 gigabytes per second. Holy smokes.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I know. Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah. So this is an interesting machine, but where it got really interesting for me is what they were comparing it to. And the M1, so there's two processors in this thing. The M1 Max version of it, which we'll call the baseline, which is an interesting place to start, they were saying is 3.4 times faster than the fastest 27-inch iMac. And that sort of made me a little sad because what they were telegraphing is this is the replacement for the 27-inch iMac. That is not coming, right? There is no 27-inch iMac coming. The M1 Ultra chip, which we'll sort of get into, they compared. So maybe there's hope for the iMac because they compared the M1 Ultra chip and saying it was 80% faster than the fastest Mac Pro. But then at the end of the event, they and I want to get the quote right. They said Mac Pro is for another day. So there is a Mac Pro coming for sure. Or at least that's the plan. I mean, Apple can change their plans, but I think the Mac, the 27-inch iMac, this is the replacement for it, which is kind of a shame. They were talking about, how it doesn't take up much space and yada, yada, yada. Well, my iMac, if I have a 27-inch iMac in my studio, which it turns out I do, and if I want to replace it with a M1-based machine, which also it turns out I do, I now need to add this Mac Mini-sized thing to my desktop in my studio, which I do not have to add because I have an iMac in front of me. So that made me a little sad. But, that's how these things go. It's life.
Yeah. There's one thing that made me sad, Dave.
What's that?
$39.99. That's a bit rich for my...
That downright depresses me. Not just sad.
Yeah, but you're comparing. I mean, you're comparing the Mac, the M1 Ultra price, right? Like I'm looking through my notes here, but let me look at my actual notes because that's what's going to get me.
It was $19.99 for the Max and $39.99 for the Ultra.
I thought it was $34.99 for the Ultra.
I wrote $39.99. I could be incorrect. And then $15.99 for the display, which is another discussion in a minute.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. Interesting.
But Dave, I got to say, I think I disagree on the 27-inch iMac only because this thing smokes the Pro. And if they're going to do another Pro, really, there's got to be something for this is a prosumer, actually more of a professional model, I think.
I agree. But I think the 24-inch iMac is Apple's plan for the iMac. Yeah, I think so. Maybe. I mean, what do I know? Like, I know. I've told you more than I know.
Yeah,
right?
Well, right.
Yeah. So
I just think, wow, this is such a smoking.
No, you're
machine.
right. You're right. Yeah. So I had my data wrong. So the M1 Max will start at $19.99 and the Ultra at $39.99. So actually, $19.99 isn't.
That's doable.
Unreasonable.
No, it's not. It's certainly not cheap. My problem with it is that it is more Mac than I need in this studio.
Agreed.
Right? I mean, like, let's face it, but here's the problem. Arguably, so is an M1 Mac Mini, other than maybe the RAM, right? I might want more than the 16 gigs of RAM I can get in an M1 Mini. And so the only way to get a desktop machine with more than 16 gigs of RAM today, or Friday, arriving on the 18th, right? You can order Friday, arrives on the 18th, begins arriving on the 18th. The only way to do that is to buy one of these new Mac Studios. So, you're right, Pete. It does leave, there's a middle ground, because I want an M1-based Mac, essentially an M1-based Mac Mini that has more than 16 gigs of RAM and a 27-inch Apple, 27-inch 5K display. Yeah. And, there is no way to do that right now. But the thing is, would a regular M1 Mini with 16 gigs of RAM be enough for someone like me in the studio? And the answer is, you know what? Probs.
Yeah.
Probs.
Well, that's what I'm running, though I'm on Intel. But yeah.
No, you're not. No, I was just going to say, that's not even close to what you're running, right? Yeah. Yeah. Because, I mean, the machine I have in the studio here is, it's the 27-inch, 2019, 8-core i9, iMac. And even with Turbo Boost Switcher Pro enabled to disable Turbo Boost, I'm running at 22% of my CPU right now while we're doing the show with video, and I'm recording audio. At least I hope I am, and all that good stuff. So it's fine. It doesn't max out. I don't know. Maybe I'm overthinking this. Hey, we've met, right? So, yeah, it's an interesting thing. I don't know. I like this. But I'm not sure.
I'm jonesing for the machine. I just couldn't justify it.
Right. Right. Yes. You can hear, I'm super torn on this. And this is why we do these episodes right away afterwards. Cause it's certainly for me, and I think for all three of us, it's part of how we process,
Well, I mean, Dave, I was impressed many years ago. I was invited by one of the listeners when I happened to be on an LA layover to go out and tour the studios. And as we got some of the backstage access, I watched them editing television shows for network broadcast on a Mac Pro. I'm like, that's their machine, their go-to machine. And this thing now smokes that. It's like, oh my gosh.
But I understand why they call it studio. So I don't know if we mentioned this, but the thing is, this thing can support not one, not two, not three, but 4 external displays, which I don't think any other Mac can currently do.
I thought it was
so.
3.
It's really meant for people that are doing, as they showed in the videos, video work and high bandwidth type of work. As Dave said, I don't think it's meant for like a podcast rig. It's way overkill for something like that.
Right.
No, it's not. I gotta have one.
Yeah, well, but I do more than that here, right? I mean, not only do we do a video podcast where I do some video editing. For those of you that don't know, we do pre-record all of our ads, and I put video into those. Now, I mean, it's compared to what 99% of people who say they do video editing do. What I do is very simple, but it's nice to have speed and all of that to do it. I also run real-time recordings here, multi-track stuff, and that absolutely uses, CPU and all the I/O bandwidth, right, to be able to keep up with all of that. So, I mean, do I need 4 monitors in here? No, I need 2, right? And that's more than enough, or that is enough. I don't want to say it's more than enough for me. But there is a middle ground that arguably isn't being served, and we are arguing over whether it will be served. We don't know, but yeah. It is a sweet little machine, though. I like where Apple's going with this. The modularity of it, I get it. They want to give people flexibility. Like you said, John, right? You can have 4, of these studio displays, which we'll talk about in a minute, plus a 4K display connected to the Mac Studio. That's amazing, but you don't have to. You're not forced to buy any of those, right? You can connect this thing to whatever you want, and so it gives you that flexibility, which is kind of nice. It just means if you're replacing that 27-inch iMac, you now have to buy a display. Yeah, I don't know. It's interesting. Are you? So I will ask my question, but I will answer it first. I think I'm about 50-50 on whether I'm going to pick one of these things up. I probably will wait until they go on refurb to make my final decision, and we'll see how it goes from there. How about you, John or Pete? John.
Personally, excuse me, I think my next machine for the podcast rig is going to be an M1 Mac Mini. Okay. Because right now I have the Intel one. I mean, it performs well. I'm looking right now. I'm at 13% CPU, 20% GPU. So this machine, even though it's a 2018 with plenty of SSD and RAM, does what I need it to do. And I do it for gaming sometimes too, and it performs well enough for the gaming that I do. So, I mean, the thing is, do I need it? No. Do I want it? Maybe. But I'd like the dust to settle because, M1, there's still some weirdness.
Not really.
There. Not a lot.
Most of that dust has settled. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. How about you, Pete?
Yeah. Well, a little history. I had the 2019 16-inch MacBook Pro.
Okay.
And then I saw the performance of the M1 MacBook Pro, and I went down to the 13-inch, and I never thought I'd go that small with a portable again. My current needs are now that I really can't justify this studio machine. I would love to have one, can't justify it. Right. But I could be retiring in the next 3 to 5 years. I guarantee something along those lines is going to be Pete's retirement present to himself. That's a machine.
Yep.
That, with that kind
when you're on the road less, I can totally see that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, just the video processing, that sort of thing. Because I shoot a lot of 4K and 5K video with the drone, and what a pleasure it would be to crunch all that down with a machine like that.
Totally. Yeah, totally. So, that makes a lot of sense to me. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. All right, so let's talk about the M1 Ultra, the chip that is in the higher end of these two options for the Mac Studio. And right now, the high-end Mac Studio is the only Apple device where you can choose to get this M1 Ultra chip. You can choose the M1 Max for the low end, low end, with air quotes.
That's a low bar.
Yeah. And then the M1 Ultra for the high end. What's interesting, though, is it really, as Apple explained it to us, the M1 Ultra is really two M1 Max chips that are linked together via some high bandwidth bridge that they built into the M1 Max and didn't tell anybody about.
Ultra Fusion at 2.5 terabytes per second.
Yeah.
You beat me to it, Pete, because I made a note of that too. So they're like, normally connecting processors can ruin your day if you don't do it right, but it sounds like they did it right, and that it's, very high bandwidth between the two of them. Yeah. So it's actually pretty clever.
It's really clever. I like it. Yeah, it's super smart. And that's how we go up to that 128 gigs of RAM in this thing. Right? Because we have two M1 Max chips that both get to do their full thing. One thing I really liked about what Apple said with this is, to software, it looks like one chip. And that, right? Like, that's super smart of them to do that, because it allows all the apps that have already been written to just run on it, and Apple takes care of, spreading it around on the various chips. So I like this.
And this keeps, is it Moore's Law? Roughly every 18 months double? Is that the name of it?
That's true. We haven't talked about Moore's Law in a long time. It was Gordon Moore, the co-founder of Intel, said that, every 18 months, the processing power would double. That was true, effectively-ish, up until
Early
we
2000s.
started. Yeah, well, when we switched from just speeding up single-core CPUs and started going wide with multi-core CPUs, right? Like that was the change to that. It was like, we're not going to, because there was a massive heat problem. The faster you made it, right? So it was way better, way more efficient to go wide with it. Of course, that was a big change from a software architecture standpoint, because you weren't just writing for one chip anymore. You now did have to write in a multi-threaded way and all that, right, John?
Yes.
Yeah.
I would say Intel led the charge with the whole multi-core thing, which I'm sure, they were working on their labs for a while. But yeah, as you pointed out, there were thermal and other challenges. But yeah, depending on the type of programming that you do, yes, you may have to manage threads yourself. And that can get complex.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, the OS can handle some of that work, but if you want to write a really efficient application, then you probably want to manage the threads and the processes, with each core taking up a thread. Again, there are some tools and all that do that for you, but if you want peak performance.
Ooh, nicely done, sir.
Ka-ching, Mr. Braun.
I got to say, actually, most of the stuff that I did was lower level embedded work, and multi-threading wasn't really a smart thing to do if you wanted to maintain control of the system and make it reliable.
That makes sense. Yeah, for that kind of stuff, sure. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. So yeah, the Outtro will do up to 128 gigs of unified memory, which again, as we've talked about with other iterations of Apple Silicon M1, means that you get the RAM is shared, the memory is shared between the GPU and the CPU, so it doesn't have to shift data back and forth. It just, like, both chips can take a look at the memory as they choose, which makes things way more efficient because you don't have to send stuff across the bus from the CPU to the GPU for the GPU to then process and then send back and that sort of thing. But that, 20 cores on the CPU, 16 what they call power cores, right? And then high performance cores, and then 4 high efficiency cores. That's on the Ultra. So again, it's the 10 core CPU of the M1 Max doubled, as one might expect.
So and then a 64 core GPU, which is insane.
Correct.
Why would you need that much? Well, some people do.
So my question is to either of you, and you may not have the answer then, but the lack of power that this thing uses. How are they doing that? All right. Is it magic incantations? Is it, what is it that they're doing?
It's engineering.
It's all the MK Ultra they took. Wait, no. Wait, that's not it.
Yeah. But what engineering, I guess, is what I'm asking. What if they changed with this M1 coming off of the Intel chips and going to this? I mean, it's, a billion transistors here, a billion transistors there. Pretty soon you're talking about real computing power, to paraphrase Everett Dirksen. But sorry, I'm old.
No. I mean,
the engineering's amazing.
I think this was the intent of Intel's Turbo Boost was, if I don't need to consume power, I'm going to go into a low maintenance mode. But if I need the juice, then I'm going to ramp it up. And I think Apple pretty much, I say they were inspired by that, but
well, they did it a different way, right? They put literally, these high efficiency cores versus the power cores, and so, like, if you have an M1 Mac, you can watch, and it was way easier when I had that M1 Pro, MacBook Pro, which I've since given to my son. So I'm back to an M1, which has an equal number of high efficiency and high performance cores. It has 4 of each, whereas the M1 Pro, I had 2 of one and 8 of the other, or 6 of the other. I can't remember off the top of my head. Somebody in the chat room will correct me. But it was super easy with iStat menus when I only had 2 high efficiency cores to see which ones were being used for most operations. And most of the time, it was 2 cores that were being used. So for, I would say 90% of what I did, I was just using the high efficiency cores. And then, when I launched something that was going to take, like, for whatever reason, launching Pixelmator Pro, the launch of it chews up every bit of CPU power I could possibly have, which I suppose is good. Like, it's going to do what it needs to do and get launched. I don't know what it's doing, but there's a few seconds of just peak thing. And I would see the high performance cores, light up, and then they too would slow down unless I did something, like a machine learning image resizing or whatever, and then everybody would light up again. But I think Apple solved that problem a different way than Intel. Instead of using Turbo Boost, they were just like, well, we're just going to put different cores for different functions.
No, I agree. They architected the chip to have these different sections that had explicit uses, and the OS kind of figures it out. It's like, oh, well, I don't need to use the high performance. I'll use the wimpy one.
Yeah. And this was designed for iPhone at first, right? iPhone and iPad, because like battery life is paramount on mobile devices. So it's like, like let's prioritize these high efficiency things as much as we can, and then only use the other ones to preserve user experience, right? Like that. Yeah.
Because even my M1 MacBook Pro is the first truly living up to its battery life. It's like, oh my gosh, this thing goes all stinking day. It's not even close to being done. So,
it's crazy getting 15 plus hours out of a laptop. It's amazing. I love it. That's great. Yeah. All right. We have the studio display, an iPhone, an iPad, maybe even some Apple TV stuff, and some other things that we may have noticed during the event there. But so we'll talk about those because I'm eager to talk about the studio display. My feelings on it in the last 2 hours have run a complete 180 that I would call it even a 360. I don't know. But we'll talk about that in a minute. The next thing, if it works for you, Mr. Braun, is I would love to talk about our sponsor.
Me too.
All right. Hey, look, iMazing, one of our favorite apps here. We talk about it all the time, and that's because iMazing is the Swiss Army knife of iOS device management. This is a desktop app for macOS and Windows, which lets you take control of your iOS data. You can make time machine style wireless backups. You can easily transfer documents, media, and content, but also dig into things like system files. You can access device and battery diagnostics. We do that here on the show all the time and more. All the data that iMazing looks at stays local on your computer or on the drive of your choice. And you do get to choose, which is also kind of amazing. And backups can be encrypted for maximum privacy. So, some of the features that we love to use here, obviously the first one, right, the one we just mentioned, which is backup your phone, your iPhone or iPad safely and wirelessly. And then you can dig into your backup history and really granularly kind of pull things out or do what you need to. You can also browse your photo library without syncing it. You can export multiple versions of each photo, ultra wide, originals of edited items, videos of live photos, right? These are things that we all need to do. This takes over where Apple's tools sort of, finish, if you will. You can save and export WhatsApp chats or iOS messages to PDF, Excel, or plain text. So you want to keep a backup of your things, you can do that way. You can quickly drag and drop songs and movies from your iPhone to your computer and vice versa. No sync required. And you can download and install iOS apps, managing your app library from your desktop. The folks at DigiDNA keep iMazing constantly updated. These folks are Apple fans who enjoy supporting the latest iOS and macOS features, and it's already fully compatible with iOS 15, iPadOS 15, of course, macOS Monterey. And recently, iMazing gained tools for professionals who manage fleets of iOS devices. iMazing Configurator enables powerful configuration and provisioning automation of devices in bulk. And iMazing CLI, you know what that means, allows full scripting of iMazing's powerful feature set from the command line. It's amazing, right? Yeah, here's the most amazing part. You get 30% off. It's true. Just for being a Mac Geek Gab listener, you get 30% off all iMazing personal licenses until the end of the month, but you got to use coupon code MGG30 because of your 30%, right? So MGG30 when you purchase a license from iMazing.com. Go check it out. iMazing.com. MGG30 is your coupon code for 30% savings. And our thanks to iMazing for sponsoring this episode. All right, let's talk about this studio display. This is Apple's 27-inch 5K Retina display. So the same display that you would get in an iMac, effectively, right? A 27-inch iMac. Effectively the same display that you'd get from LG with their 5K display. Plus, Apple added a bunch of things to justify the $1,599 price tag on this thing. The things they added, a 12-megapixel camera that supports center stage, a 6-speaker sound system that somehow supports spatial audio. So, okay. 3 USB-C ports for device connectivity and a Thunderbolt port for upstream connectivity to your Mac. If you happen to connect it to a laptop, that Thunderbolt port also provides 96 watts of power for charging. So you get one cable to plug in to rule them all. I wish Steve Jobs could have lived to see the USB-C world with power delivery, because like he and at his urging, the engineering teams at Apple worked super hard to create, the whole fiasco that they created with the whole Apple displays to have just the one power cable. And now it's just part and parcel of pretty much everything that exists. So he definitely saw things before the rest of us did. And that was, to me, that was one of them. But it's a $1,600 27-inch display. It has an A13 chip in it. I'm really not sure why we need a chip. Well, because of $1,500, $1,600, maybe that would be the reason. I don't know.
Well, it's maybe they were thinking the studio computer wouldn't be able to keep up. No, maybe that wasn't it.
What is this chip
doing?
doing?
Well, they did mention that you can hook up to 3 of these to a MacBook Pro, which I don't think you can do with Apple's other displays. Is that right?
Well, first of all, Apple doesn't have other displays. And second, well, they do. They have the Pro XDR display. I'm sorry.
Right.
Yes, I stand corrected. They don't have displays for most of us. But yeah, you can. The MacBook Pro will support all those displays for sure.
Yeah, the other thing I noticed they mentioned is that so the Thunderbolt port on it can provide 96 watts of power. Okay, that's kind of fun if you want to use your monitor to charge your other things.
Yeah, I'm just not sure why it needs this A13 chip. I mean, maybe it's to process spatial audio.
Yeah, that'd be my guess.
Maybe it's to run these microphones and do whatever they'd say that there's a 4 microphone array, I think, or it's a 3 or 4 microphone array that, just like we have in our MacBook Airs and our MacBook Pros, at a zoomed out level. I'm not saying it's the exact same one, but it's the same concept where they're using multiple microphones to narrow down the sound and actually focus things. Essentially, beamforming, if you will, to keep from getting echoes and that sort of thing.
Right.
So.
I mean, the other thing I noticed is that, so they made sure to point out that there's a 12 megapixel ultra wide camera in this. And I've noticed that in several of the announcements, Apple seems to be gravitating towards making the front camera not lame.
Oh, it's great. Well, I mean, that's the whole center stage thing, right? Is being able to use that. For those of you that haven't used center stage, it's a pretty, it's a fantastic experiential thing when you're doing, either Zoom or FaceTime calls or whatever, where either you're moving around a little bit or you have multiple people that want to be seen by the camera. We do family Zooms every week, and I have this Poly, I think it's the P15 from Poly.com, which is this bar. We've talked about it on the show before, that sits on top of the monitor. I actually have it over at the house, and it's got a camera and speakers and all that in it. But the camera supports, they don't call it center stage because, of course, that's Apple's terminology for it, but it's the same idea where it detects how many people are there, and it either zooms the camera in or out and pans it to keep all the people, however many there are, in frame. And it's fantastic. I can be sitting there talking to my family. Lisa sits down, the camera zooms out and pans, and now, Lisa and I are perfectly in the frame. Center Stage does the same thing, and now it's on the iPads, and now it's on this screen. So, yeah, I guess that's part of what it needs an A13 chip for, I suppose.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead, Pete.
I was going to say, I've got a couple, one's a feature that I think is really cool.
Okay.
And the other one, I'll be interested to see how good it is. And the one of the features is the ability to rotate like an iPad, whether it's portrait or landscape.
It do that?
That's what they showed.
Oh, yeah, they showed
it.
The thing is, Pete, Mac OS has actually supported that for a while for most displays.
Really? Okay. That's cool. Because I just thought, man, if you're working with, a portrait video or a portrait picture and you're trying to edit it, how much more can you do if you rotate it into the portrait mode and start working with it that way? I mean, I looked at that and went, that's cool. You aren't looking at a bunch of black bars on both sides of the screen. You have full real estate at your disposal.
Yep.
I thought that was neat. And then the other thing they're talking about is the anti-reflective glass on it. I'll be real interested to see, because that was the biggest drawback I had with my 27-inch iMac when I had that, was the windows were behind me in my office, and that just made it difficult to look at that thing for very long. It wasn't the display's fault, but I mean, the anti-reflective glass should be
the environment. Well, it's by default, it's got this anti-reflective glass, and then they commented that they offer a nano texture glass option to even further minimize glare.
Yeah.
So
I gotta say, Pete, I'm totally opposite in that I never liked matte displays because I wanted to get the full brightness and vibrancy of the display, and I felt, correctly or not, that a matte display wouldn't allow
takes some of that away. Yeah. No, I get that. I just, my particular environment was the windows were behind me in my office, and it just made it miserable to look at the screen for very long.
Mm-hmm. No, I hear you.
Yeah.
But no, I'm looking right here now. So system preferences displays, if you go in there is, for most monitors, a rotation setting. Okay. So if you need to rotate.
My impression was, and I could be wrong, that all you had to do was rotate the display, and it was like an iPhone.
No, I think that they made that. I'm pretty sure that that's the icing on cake, is that the monitor knows, hey, somebody rotated me, so I'm going to change it, where otherwise, you have to manually set it. So
it just knows.
It knows. Works. I can see for programming, especially, like, that's the use case that comes to mind for me, is, having the ability to see a tall monitor with code, would be fantastic. Yeah. So at first, when they started talking about all these features, and especially when they said the A13 chip, and you can watch the evolution of my thinking if you follow my tweet stream on, Dave Hamilton on Twitter, you can see it was like, okay, what are they going to charge us for this thing? Right. And then they came out with the price, $15.99. That's a lot of money for a display. And then I started thinking about it. Like, wait a minute. This is, as I said earlier, effectively the same glass as my 5K LG display that I have in the office, that I happily paid for a refurb version. I paid $950. It was somewhere in that range, right? The display normally sells for like $1150 or something like that. And so that's we'll call it a dumb display, right? It doesn't have it has cameras, but not the smart cameras. It doesn't have the spatial audio. It doesn't have True Tone in it. I don't think. Maybe it does. I don't even remember anymore. It doesn't have all the Thunderbolt ports. It has some, right? So it's like, okay, well, if we take this and back it out that way, well, now this display is a few $100s more than LG's 5K display. For someone, probably even someone like me, where I'm going to use a different camera here in the studio. Speakers. I'm not going to use the speakers in the display. I have better speakers here. It's just not going to be how it is. So I would just buy one of the LG displays and save a few $100, but I'm only saving a few $100, right? So I think this price is actually fair. as crazy as that sounds to say. Because like, where else are you going to get a 5K display, right? You buy the LG display, or now you buy Apple's. That's it. And there is zero comparison between a 4K display, a 4K, UHD display, and Apple, the LG or Apple's 5K display. You can get a decent looking 4K display at 27 inches, but it's not going to be this. Nowhere close. So,
right. I would agree with you. So to me, the value add is, number one, there's a decent camera. And number two, there's advanced audio features. And number three, there's all the ports and stuff. So that may convince someone that this is worth it. Yeah. Though I think I'm with you, is that, the monoprice screen that I got here is, bigger. And I think it's like $300 or something like that.
Yeah, but that's a 4K screen, not a 5K.
Yes. No, I understand.
Very, very different, right? Like, yeah. But even if you take a high quality, I would call the monoprice a low. I have one right next to me. Don't take any offense at this, but I would call that a low quality and low priced, 27 inch, 4K screen, and it's fine. It works fine, but you compare that to like a $500 screen, same resolution screen, 4K 27-inch screen from ViewSonic, night and day, right? Put the two next to each other and you'll never want to look at the monoprice screen. Yeah. And then you put the LG display or the iMac display or now the studio display from Apple next to either one of those, and it's like, okay, I want to look at that. Like, it's, so I think it's worth it. For people who care.
Think what the audio is like. Dave, what speakers do you have? Are you talking about those Sonos ones, or do you have others that I don't remember?
In the studio, the studio here, I have lots of different speakers. Right. But I'm using I have these Audio Engine A5 Pluses here.
Oh, right, okay.
In the studio.
So, but I'm just thinking, add the price of those to the cost of your LG monitor, and I don't know what this sounds like, but it looks like it sounds amazing, if you can say that.
But that's I agree with you.
Yeah.
I think the price is fair, but targeting it at someone who has a studio, it's like, I don't need Apple's 12 megapixel camera. I've got 3 other cameras that all are better than that one, unless I want center stage. But as I said, even that I've already got. I'm sure Apple's speakers sound great, but I've already got all the speakers I need, right? So it's like, well, I have no doubt that those features are worth the price that you're paying for them, but most people in a studio don't need those things in their monitor. Yeah, that's kind of my argument here.
They've already built it. Yeah.
You've already got it, and you're going to use something different anyway. Like, even if you're building from the ground up, you're not going to go with that. That is, that's for. I'm not exactly sure who it's for, is really the question. But it's fine. The LG display exists. You just buy that. You're good to go. But if you want these features, well, then really, and this, as we're having this conversation and the thoughts are crystallizing a little better, who this display is for, Pete? People who wanted a 27-inch iMac.
Well, there's that, yeah. And again, for like a retirement machine for me, or one to process like drone video, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
That will be more than sufficient for the things that I want to do. Whereas you, my friend, are quite the audiophile. I wish I had your hearing.
Yeah, right. Well, but let's look at me down in the office, right? Yeah. Yes, I have some speakers on my desk, but if I had decent speakers in my monitor, I would happily get rid of the Audio Engine A2s that I have on my desk just to free up space. Yeah. So I could take one of these studio displays and plug it in. Wait a minute. I just sold myself on one of these studio displays.
There you go.
No, here's the deal. I'm going to take that LG 5K screen that's downstairs and bring it up here into the studio. Plug it in to one of these, Mac Studio things. So now I'm good to go. Have everything I need. And then I'll buy the studio display, put that down in the office. It's got the speakers. Whether I'll use the camera or not remains to be seen. But now it's kind of got everything I want for a typical desktop machine, not a studio desktop machine, but a typical office desktop machine. And yes, I'm super spoiled to be able to even have this conversation, but that's it. That's where those two screens belong for someone like me. Because my iMac that's sitting in front of me as we're having this conversation, I'm realizing it has speakers in it. Are they good? Honestly, I have no clue. I've never used them.
Right on.
Is the camera in it good? I can already tell you, no, it's terrible, right? And so I don't use any of that. It's like the display is a display that happens to have a decent computer hanging off.
How old's that? How old's that iMac?
Well, it's almost 3 years old, Pete. It's 2019.
Wow. Okay. Well, I was just because the comment you made to me, like the camera, I'm using my in-machine camera. They're just getting better and better. And you told me that the fidelity on it was amazing.
Yeah, you look better than the rest of us here. It's amazing.
Well,
yeah.
I look marvelous.
You do.
I feel
it's better to look good than to feel good.
That's right.
So I think the 27-inch iMac is dead. To answer Andrew Caddick's question in the chat room or on YouTube or whatever it came in, I do.
I was going to ask you that, but I'm gonna say I think they're going to make a 27-inch eventually.
So
this is a stopgap, maybe.
I don't know. I mean, all the comparisons they were making were basically saying if you've got the 27-inch iMac Intel, this is your replacement machine. Now, to be fair, to your point, it might be this is your replacement machine today, right? Because it's not going to be static, right? Apple's offerings are going to constantly evolve over time. But I don't think they have plans to make that 27-inch iMac, man.
What's the top end 27-inch iMac go for, roughly? Just off the top of your head.
That's a great question, Pete. Why don't we because
if you get the Ultra, you're looking at a $5,600.
Yeah, it's true.
Replacement. And if you get the Max, you're still looking at a $3,600 replacement. So
hey guys,
they don't sell them anymore. Just kidding.
I'm not finding it.
Neither am I.
All I'm seeing is 24-inch.
Yeah.
I think
Dave, you may have stumbled into the truth.
Well, I bet if you look in the refurb store, you'll find.
There you go. Well,
yeah, but that's not.
But Intel. Yeah, I understand.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm no.
Dave, you have stumbled bass backwards into the truth, as they say.
Even a blind squirrel.
Right.
No, they still have 27-inch in the refurb store.
Yeah, because this morning you could buy one new, and so they have to get rid of their stock. But the refurb store doesn't mean it's not discontinued. It just means they have stock of them. Right. Yeah, you cannot buy a 27-inch iMac anymore. All right, so there's the answer.
Yeah,
that's it.
You're right, Dave. I stand corrected.
That's it.
People should write to feedback at macgeekgab.com and tell us where they fell on that issue.
Pete, did I hear you right? Did you say feedback at macgeekgab.com?
I heard you both, and I think you said feedback at macgeekgab.com. And if somebody steps on my bunion, I'll shoot you both. I didn't know if I'd ever be able to work that quote into a show. And I still don't know if I could.
I don't think you did.
I don't think I
have no idea.
That wasn't quite as good as peak performance earlier.
No, John definitely wins. Yeah, that was much better. Hey, they made a new iPhone SE, which looks a whole lot like the old iPhone SE, except it has an iPhone 13 parts inside it. That's interesting.
And they fed it some raw vegetables. Now it's green.
The interesting part to me about this, so we're going in our own order here, not Apple's order of the event. The iPhone 13 or the iPhone SE was the first of the new things that they announced. There were a couple of things I noticed with that then carried through. In fact, found us where we've spent the last hour here, 47 minutes or whatever it is. But they said, let's talk about Apple Silicon. And then they went and talked about the iPhone SE, the iPad Air, and then the new M1 Ultra and on to the Mac Studio and all that stuff. But I thought it was really telling that Apple's story of Apple Silicon is not the Mac's story of Apple Silicon. It is very much, here's all the things we make with Apple Silicon, which is, pretty much everything now. It's an interesting thing. And when they started talking about the iPhone SE, the comparison product was iPhone 8. So that's the market of people that they are looking at and saying, it's time for you to upgrade. Just like the Mac Studio it's time for you 27-inch iMac people to upgrade. The iPhone SE, it's time for you to upgrade if you have an iPhone 8.
26 times faster.
Though Dave, right. I got to say, I'm very compelled. So right now I have an iPhone 12 mini, as do you, I think.
I have a 13 mini.
Oh, 13. Okay.
Of course.
Oh, wait, do I have a 13 or a 12?
I can't tell you.
It was a 12.
I don't know.
I'm pretty sure it was a 12.
But
anyways,
you're right. Yeah.
Here's the thing that excited me. In this day and age, Dave, of masking and stuff like that, I hate Face ID. I really hate it. And this model has Touch ID. Now, number one, why can't Apple put both in a device? I don't understand.
Because that way they make you buy a watch.
ID. So like my iPad Air has Touch ID, my iPhone is Face ID, and my MacBook Pro is Touch ID. It's like it's chaos.
Yeah. So you need to sign up either for the developer or public beta of iOS 15.4.
Yeah, I know they go ahead.
It changes the game because with a mask, it doesn't matter. You can unlock your phone. You can Apple Pay. You can do all the things that Face ID lets you do. Doesn't matter whether you have a mask on or not. So like that problem goes away. I don't think, even if that were not the case, but it is the case. Mm-hmm. If it were not the case, I don't think you'd be happy going from the 5.4 inch glass screen of your 12 or 13 mini down to the 4.7 inch glass screen of the iPhone SE. I think you would feel like you just got shortchanged on what you can do on that device.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah. I think it'd be a tough transition. You could do it. We humans are remarkably flexible when we force ourselves to be, right? But
I mean, I went from the 8 to the 12. And I accepted it because I think the screen was pretty much the same size.
I think
it was smaller.
It was bigger. The screen on the 12 mini was bigger than the 8. Yeah.
Right. No. Yeah. They got rid of some of the black space or whatever. Yeah. So they took advantage of the full display. You're
correct.
Right. So.
Correct. Going back, I think it would be a difficult step. But go get that 15.4 beta. Like I forget that I'm running betas. It's been super stable for me here. But yeah, I mean, you know,
I'm going to learn how to do that. I haven't been doing any of the betas.
But I mean, the other thing is, dude, the price point. I mean, $429 starting, though I'm sure you pay more if you want more RAM.
Sure. Yeah.
But that's very compelling. I think that's going to bring a lot more people into the iPhone space.
I 100% agree.
Because, I mean, pretty much these days, getting a modern iPhone, you're talking $1,000.
Yep.
Now, how you pay for it, it depends on your relationship with.
But you are going to pay for it.
Oh yeah,
another. You know?
Yeah, you're paying either way. Yeah, right. Yeah. It's an interesting thing. All right, so the new iPad Air, that didn't really jump at me. Oh, the one thing that jumped at me with the iPad Air is that it's got an M1 chip in it now. That's a big deal.
Yeah. And what else did they say? 5G? I don't know if they had 5G. My iPad Air does not have 5G.
There you go. Yep.
Even though there's a 5G chip in it, if I put it on my phone, then it's like, oh yeah, you're 5G. So that's nice. And then what
do you mean
a
5? Wait. No, the iPad, the OG iPad Air does not have a 5G chip in it. Right.
I'm saying the iPad Air that I have does not have. No, it has cellular, but it doesn't enable 5G.
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah, it doesn't have a 5G radio in it. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, but the
Whereas
new one
this
does.
One does.
Yeah.
So that's nice. And then of course, it's faster and
it's got
also
and
I noticed also they're like, oh, and this by the way also has a 12 megapixel camera, which I think is something new for the iPad Air, right?
Correct. Yeah. Yeah, it's a good upgrade. I mean, it's not remarkable, but it's it's good. Yeah. Anything more on the iPad Air before we jump on? I was impressed with the the little bit where they talked about Apple TV Plus. Two things jumped out at me. Number one was that they cut that deal for Friday Night Baseball. Like that is a huge deal if that's a huge deal to you, right? Like that will bring subscribers in guaranteed. If they could cut a similar deal with the NFL, and I guarantee you they are trying. Yeah. I think Steve Jobs, when Steve Jobs passed, after I got over the fact that, the poor guy's family didn't get to have him around anymore. And then sort of the rest of us, once I sort of processed through all of that, one thought came to mind, and it was that we just lost the guy that was going to negotiate the NFL online. And to this day, it still hasn't happened. Actually, that's not true. If you don't live in the U.S., it's happened. You can watch NFL games online, no problem, if you live in the UK.
Right. And then, and next year, Thursday Night Football is going to Amazon.
It's going from Twitter to Amazon or whatever it was to Amazon. That's right.
All you won't be able to watch them on television, on broadcast television. You have to go to Amazon.
That I didn't realize.
Yes.
Interesting.
Amazon got exclusivity on Thursday. Pretty sure it's Thursday night, and they got Al Michaels, and do you
believe in miracles?
Yeah,
wow.
Right. And the rumor is they've got Troy Aikman to go with Al Michaels.
That would make sense. Those guys are a pair. Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. So anyway, I'm sure they're working on NFL as everyone would.
So
be.
Apple, I mean, for $5, $6 a month, whatever it is, is it $4.99? I mean, they'll have justifiable reason to raise it a little bit, but oh my gosh.
But no, that Friday Night Baseball, where it's 2 games exclusive. If baseball matters to you, you will sign up for Apple TV Plus without even batting an eye. And then, just as they were going through all of the stuff, it was like, look at all of the things all the movies that Apple created, the Apple originals that had Academy Award noms. And it's like, that's a really interesting twist in the world here that, Apple is a world-class movie studio, which is just amazing. I mean, it's not that I didn't know this coming into the event today, but just seeing it sort of put it in front of me, I was like, wow, that's fascinating. Wow.
And they were smart enough not to hire John Hamm.
Yeah, that's right. Although I am looking forward. I'm a huge Fletch fan, so I'm very much looking forward to John Hamm's Fletch movie. Although the reason I'm a huge Fletch fan is because of Chevy Chase, so maybe John Hamm will ruin it, but I don't think he would.
But it's
car just hit a water buffalo.
But it measures the tension between. So I have multiple services. I have Apple TV, and I got a free trial, and then they wrote me in, and I'm not going to cancel it yet. And they've had some compelling stuff, but the thing is, most of their stuff is original content, whereas Netflix,
all of it is, Other
than
Netflix,
on the other hand, like I just started watching this one. It's kind of a disturbing show, the OA. Check it out if you haven't already. But I'm binging on that right now. But they have huge amounts of archive content, which I really like.
Sure.
But I like both. But Apple, I think, has proven that if you do, and actually Netflix has done more original programming as of late, but they also have this archive of legacy stuff that, we like to, back to the old days where, Star Trek or stuff like that. Yeah. But yeah, that was at first when he was talking about this, I'm like, that's kind of interesting. But it's like, no, actually it's very interesting that they've made progress in this service. I think Netflix is still the biggest as far as membership.
Yeah, I don't have that. I don't know that data, but that wouldn't surprise me if that's true.
And the other one I'm on the fence about is Paramount Plus, because they got Picard, and I love Star Trek.
Yeah,
but I'm like, another service.
I do that with CBS All Access when there's a new season of Discovery. I sign up for CBS All Access, I watch it, and then I turn it off. That's the end of that. Yeah. So.
Yeah, because by the time you pay for Amazon Prime and Apple TV and Netflix and next thing you know, your cable bill's looking pretty attractive. I'm going back to cable.
That's true. Yeah, Comcast, can I come back, please?
Yeah.
Now here's a trick. You can watch certain things. So Amazon acquired IMDb. You can watch certain things like, as I found, X-Files, or at least certain seasons, or no, I'm sorry, Fringe. Okay. You can watch certain things free via Amazon Prime if you know where to look.
Yep. Yeah. No, it's an interesting thing.
Which actually brings me to an Apple TV thing. I was looking yesterday for a 1950 movie called Broken Arrow with Jimmy Stewart, and I went on the Apple TV and I hit Siri and said Broken Arrow, and she went right to Plex and found it. Plex Movies. Apple TV knows where to go.
Siri
it looks through
Plex has I didn't think Plex had visibility into. Maybe it's into Siri, but not into the Apple TV app, right? Like, I don't think, like in the Apple TV app, you can have your up next or watch next queue,
right.
and that'll go and like spider out into, your other apps, not Netflix, but, other apps because they can see. I didn't think, I'm pretty sure Plex does not have a pipe there, but it wouldn't, I guess Siri is different. That's okay. I got to try that. All right.
I mean, yeah, it was really cool. I thought, well, I was looking for it. I found it on Amazon, and they wanted money. So,
yeah, of course. Right.
So I said, "Hey, Siri, find Broken Arrow," and she opened up Plex.
Interesting.
Now it's funny because also, so I don't know if you guys are Walking Dead fans, but Apple actually has ads saying you can ask Siri. I'm sorry, I was going to say S lady, but I said Siri. Sorry.
It doesn't cause a problem because you didn't say the word hey in front of it, John.
Okay. But the thing is, you can ask Siri, and they advertise this during the show. It's like you can ask Siri to show you the latest episode of Walking Dead, and I'm sure any other show that you have access to. Though I'm with you, Pete. I mean, that's impressive that it's smart enough to know where the content is to lead you to it.
Yeah.
Especially for an old movie. And who was it? Jimmy Stewart, did you say?
Yeah, Jimmy Stewart and Deborah Paget, who is still alive, according to
really?
IMDb.
No kidding.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's the event. Let us know what you folks thought. There was one thing I noticed in this as we were starting out, because I go and get screenshots from the event. So I have it on my Apple TV, and then I also have it on my computer in a web browser. And in the lower right, for the first time, at least for me, I noticed a little link that said, watch this event in ASL. And so I clicked it. And sure enough, they had the feed I saw, and I'm presuming everybody got the same feed. It was a woman at the time I was watching. It was a woman, signing the whole event. They just they put her off to the right of it, and had the event in the middle. It was the interesting part was I cut over to it while they were doing their montage of all the Apple TV highlights, and I happened to cut right while they were in a highlight of Coda, and I'm like, this woman's not doing anything. That's interesting. I was like, oh, wait a minute. I'm reading on the screen because the people in the movie are signing. Got it. If I wait 10 seconds, I will see her sign something. And sure enough, she did. But it was like, well, this is weird. Why? I know why.
My other observation, Dave, speaking of women, is nearly all of the presenters, and especially when they had the developer highlight, were all female.
That's right. Yeah.
I think
it's
to
good.
Me it's
encouraging.
Yeah, there's I've had this conversation with some friends who are female engineers, and the one of them, and I won't share their name here, although I probably could. But one of them was telling me, she obviously, feels very strongly about this and opening up opportunities for women in STEM. And then, so she was, it was a mission of hers to really make sure that, this could happen. I thought, that's great. Amazing. And then she told me, she's like, yeah, I kind of had to back off a little bit because there's not back off on complaining about companies not hiring as many women engineers. And she said, they're not there to be hired. And this was years ago before, COVID, and we had the labor shortage, which I'm sure has only exacerbated this. And the issue is, right, it's a chicken and egg thing. You are, as a human, you are more likely to follow a path if you see someone that looks like you who has successfully completed that path, right? Unless you just have the mindset of a trailblazer that says, well, no one that looks like me has done that. I'm going to make it happen, which is amazing. And I obviously commend people who do that. But it's good for us as a society to have young women, girls, able to see successful women out there as engineers, because then it just normalizes it. And it's not like I need to be the one to blaze a trail. I can just follow a trail and I can do what she did because she did it. So I can do it. No problem. And so for that reason, I was very glad to see that they highlighted female engineers.
It was very inspiring.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, great. Let's normalize this, even though it's not the norm, right? I mean, in that I'm certain the majority of engineers employed these days are identify as male, but showing women engineers, it just creates that path, and it's like, great, yep.
Well, especially I mean, they were all managers or directors or stuff like that. So yeah, you can climb the ladder.
Absolutely.
The glass ceiling is it's probably still there, but
probably
not as much.
Yeah, I'm sure you're right. Yeah, which is yeah.
Well, and some of it's by
how
choice.
About you,
I mean, aviation,
Pete?
Right? You know,
how many?
Aviation.
I was going to say, Pete. How many? Yeah. I mean, what percentage of aviators are female or maybe
I know my company it's 7%.
Okay,
which is
interesting.
Well below the norm. I know that where my daughter's going to school to be a pilot, it's 18% female.
Okay,
and that's university wide, not just pilots, but that's aerodynamic engineering and meteorology, that kind of stuff.
That's great.
But man, they're smart kids. I mean, those kids are putting payloads on the space station. So
that's awesome. I love that. That's so cool. All right, folks, thanks for listening. We will be back, of course, on Monday with Mac Geek Gab 919, another palindromic episode. We love those. We will be recording that Friday morning. If you want to join, you can go to macgeekgab.com/calendar and subscribe to our calendar. That way, you get to know when we're recording, because that's the same calendar that we use here. Thanks for hanging out with us, folks. Thank you for your time. Thanks for supporting our sponsors. Of course, you can visit iMazing.com and use coupon code MGG30, MGG30. You can check out our other sponsors and other coupon codes at macgeekgab.com/sponsors. And have a great week. Have a great day. Enjoy yourselves. Don't do anything we wouldn't do. Take care of your shoes. And John, I feel like I'm missing something.
I don't think so. I think I'm going to hand it over to Pete. Pete, what can you tell us?
Shoes. You got it with shoes. Don't get caught.
Made up. That was it. I knew I was missing something.